Ladies and gentlemen, this is episode 7 of Still Rolling, the podcast that delivers everything and nothing in equal measures. In true to form fashion, we're now sticking with trying to discover different elements of the industry from pre-production, production, and post-production. So this week, we have Jax Harney joining us. Thank you very much for joining us, Jax. Jax is a senior colorist at Envy. Is that correct? Is there any more to that? Just Envy.
Envy Advertising.
Envy Advertising.
We have two parts.
based in our nation's capital in London. Yes. So, Jax, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate you making the time for us today. I really, really appreciate it. Especially as I said, I wanted to expand on these different roles within the production process. And for me, definitely a big bugbear within the industry. It's like not getting enough time to work on color certainly is a big problem. And I love working with colorists. I personally love your work. I'm very grateful for having you on the show today because obviously we're able to get into that bit. And if the audience wants to check out your work, they can go into your Instagram and have a bit of a dive, or they can go and check out Envy's page. Well, let's get straight into it. First and foremost, how on earth are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Things are slowly developing into a new normal. I heard that people are starting to shoot again, so I'm feeling very optimistic today.
How has that actually been for you guys? I mean, obviously from my perspective with the shooting, it's been like, oh, cool, no one's filming anymore. And then I guess, does that filter down to you guys, the fact that there's simply nothing coming through, or do you have a backlog of stuff you can work on?
So yeah, we had a few jobs in the pipeline still when lockdown began. So we were fortunate that for the first couple of weeks, nothing really changed apart from relocating to my kitchen table in my lounge, which was easier than I expected.
What kind of stuff have you got there? Have you got the laptop and monitors? What kind of thing? I'm imagining a huge grading suite at home that you just like.
Yes. I took all my grade monitors home. I had a panel. I sensed that we were potentially going to be going into the lockdown, and so ran to Wix about 2 days prior to us getting locked down and bought up all of their black sort of, that floor material card stuff that you walk on, and literally built a black box hole in my lounge and had a bias light in there. And yeah, it was a little hot grading room. Oh
man, I guess a far cry from the Envy grading suites where it's like
slightly less spacious.
Slightly, to say the least.
I missed all of the runners, all of the producers, all of the assistants.
Suddenly I've got to do this myself. Like you get to lunchtime and it's like, I'm really hungry. Why has this happened?
Yeah, what I've noticed is that I definitely take for granted that I don't have to go out and get lunch every day, because when you're doing all of that, it definitely eats into that time that you've said that you can grade in.
Yeah, have you got to throw out any shout outs, any thanks to those people that looked after you while you were working?
Definitely Liam, our head runner, is 100% my respect goes out to him and always will do from now on.
There's a new level of appreciation for people working in Envy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just me. Now that I'm back in at Envy at the moment, most people are, well, I say most people, or everyone is still working from home. It's just me and Danny, the other colorists that have gone back in. And there's literally me, Danny, and Liam going into the building. So I still have massive appreciation for that guy.
That's excellent. That's good to know, though.
Yeah.
I guess the best place to start with this is probably where you got started with this, because so much about this industry is there's so many different routes in, and we kind of touched base with the people that we've been talking to so far, and they kind of shared a bit about their story. So without getting into it too much, was like being a colorist, and that is colorist correct? Color grader, or is it colorist is correct, right?
I personally prefer colorist. Some people say grader. Same.
That's what From that perspective, was it like, was that always something you were looking to get into? Was that always a fascination of yours, or whether, what was your interest in the industry to start with?
So yes and no. I had a bit of a strange route into the industry. I've always been obsessed with colour. So from school, art was my number one subject. I wasn't an academic as such at school. So when I went to college, I decided to study ceramics because I was from art at school, enjoyed making things, and I wanted to get into ceramics and pottery, and that was my passion. And through that discovered...
I can already imagine your parents' conversations with you about this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I come from Manchester. My dad worked at security at Manchester Airport, and my mum was a post office worker. And they were like, can you not just be like a nurse or a lawyer or, something that's going to bring in like loads of cash for us?
You had ambition, right?
No, I'm going to make pots.
Amazing.
So, but then I realized that I wasn't actually that good at making the pots, but I was really good at taking pictures of them.
Right, okay.
So fell into photography that way, and then discovered that I was obsessed with taking pictures.
How far did you get before you realized that you couldn't make pots?
So 1 year in, I'd say. So my second year, you have to pick what you want to... No, I didn't go to...
I was about to say you got that far. That's pretty far.
No. Didn't go to university.
Okay.
I was supposed to go to university to study photography. I was accepted at Leeds, but then didn't end up going to university because a friend of mine who works in a hair salon used to cut the photographer's wife's hair, and they needed an assistant. And I met with him for a casual coffee, and he was like, why are you going to university? I can teach you everything you need to know. Like, that's just going to be a waste of space. So I was fortunate enough to get in with him because his assistant was pregnant and leaving, and he wanted a female assistant, which was amazing back then. Like, this was many years ago. And so, I started with him when I was 17. And
we'll try and put a little timeline to that. Are we on film or are we digital yet?
Film.
Okay, cool. So we'll leave it there.
For a few years as well.
Keep going.
Yeah.
I'm in.
So I was with him for like 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. And he molded me into the perfect photography assistant, and taught me everything I knew about lighting, dealing with clients, briefs, retouching. He was the first person who got me on Adobe Photoshop. What
sort of style shooting? Are we talking studio stuff or like all sorts of different types?
He was like mainly
strobe lighting, natural lighting, that sort of conversation.
He was commercials, so he did everything from still life. He had a studio in Manchester and he had a studio in Knightsbridge. We used to flip between the two, and he used to do everything from still life. I remember we went to Switzerland on a shoot to shoot 3 snowboards in the snow, and we were there for a week to do 2 photographs.
Sounds all right.
Back in the day.
I miss those.
I miss those days.
We shan't remember too much. Well, that environment certainly sounds conducive to actually learning. It's not like you were sort of with a journalist or a sort of a photojournalist trying to learn from them whilst they're trying to do their job. Sounds like a really...
No, it was brilliant. It was me and him for a lot of the time, and he was an incredible teacher. I owe him a lot. His name was Jeff Smith. I believe he's retired now. I haven't spoken to him in a number of years, but
there you go.
Yeah, cheers to Jeff. He was awesome.
Start of Jax's colouring career.
Well, so that was. So I was then in photography for 14 years. Moved down to London.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to be, so I kind of darted around in the industry though. I wanted to be a photographer, realized that I wasn't very good at taking pictures. I'm quite good at recognizing what I'm not good at.
Sounds like you're pretty far in at that point, but not
15 years in. I was in the industry for 15 years.
I'm happy I'm talking to someone that's gainfully employed in a very, very respectful position right now, because this story could have gone another way.
I know, I'm not sounding too good right now. I promise you, Envy, I'm good for what I do. But I wanted to be a photographer. And then when I first moved to London, I realized, I'm not actually that great at taking the pictures, but I was really good at manipulating them. And that was kind of what was getting me through. Was I'd spend way more time manipulating my pictures than I did shooting them. And I found that side of it way more fun.
Okay.
So then got into retouching essentially and doing on-set retouching.
Yeah.
And that was over a number of years, went from like running a digital business with a photographer friend of mine, like renting out kit at some point. I went through several bits of the photo stills industry until I ended up sitting in on a grade because the photographer that I was working with was getting really frustrated that his still images weren't being mirrored in the motion And he was like, look, you make the stills look like they do. Can you go in and sit in and see how this is done? And that was how I then learned about color grading. And as soon as I walked in and saw like the Starship Enterprise and decided that, oh my God, this is home. This is where I now need to be.
No way.
And it all just clicked, yeah. And so now I can honestly say that I do actually think I'm quite good at color grading.
Oh,
it's just taken several number of years.
Definitely talk yourself up more than that for sure.
Thanks.
All good. That's why.
So that's my random route in.
No, I appreciate you sharing the story because there's so many different things there that kind of stand out for me. I mean, the amount of directions you can pick up on those things. But one of those fascinating moments is like, definitely the retouching element. Even looking at, obviously, I'm assuming that was some sort of ad campaign where they've got complementary stills to the video side of it, of course. But again, there's so many different parts of that conversation. It's like, well, why? Why did it look so different? But if you're shooting on, I don't know, to coin some sort of digital equivalent with a massive sensor and a stills photography camera and those sorts of things, then you're getting into the film side of it, or the video. I shouldn't say film, video side of it. Terms get confusing. The video side of it, certainly it's like, okay, hold on. How do we replicate that? Even if we're using similar lenses, we're going for the sharpest image. There's so many other variables. I mean, of course, a big part of that is simply the color. Like, you're not representing one singular frame. It's 25 frames a second. There's so many different elements that come into contention at that point in time. But we did promise we weren't going to nerd out too much here. So we'll take this one step.
I think we're in safe territory at the minute.
We're safe so far? We're safe so far. Okay, cool. Well, so a lot of what you do is working on advertising stuff. How does that process kind of work? Let's go through the basics of that. So do you get to pick the projects you work on for one? Or is it very much like they bring something to you? How does that process work?
It's kind of a mixture, really. Majority is obviously, because it's advertising, they'll come to the producers, there'll be a budget, and that will often dictate, as always, how much a job can get in. Obviously, a job that's got a huge budget is more likely to get time than a job with a small budget, but a job with a small budget would perhaps come to me first. So anybody who knows me knows that they can segue their way in with a really pretty looking grade, and I get excited, and then I'll be potentially up for giving one of my evenings up or something like that.
They just dazzle you with the smoke and mirrors and that's it.
Yeah, I've done myself in quite some times on, I've ended up working like a full week doing evening grades because I can't say no.
Not the kind of thing we're trying to promote here.
I know. I'm a sucker. But if there's a job that's got a massive budget, obviously we are a business and we do have overheads that we have to pay. So I love doing charity work. There's directors that I work with a lot, and because it's charity based on what they do, there's not always necessarily the budget that will give you a daytime slot in an ad agent. If an ad agency's got that time, we have to think about the building and staff and everybody that's there. So yeah, that's when I'd be like, okay, cool, I'll do it tonight instead. Like, come on in, we'll have a few beers and make you look pretty.
Well, too far. It's good to know that you're actually giving those opportunities to people that are actually, I guess, something I was going to follow up on in a bit was some of those projects that come through those sort of different avenues and different channels. Because, I mean, I've worked a bit in advertising in terms of like the shoots that come through, and it's more often than not, as you said, it's how much time do we have versus the money that we have to make something happen. And like, if you come to me, the ambition's like that, I need to go like, right, cool, let's do everything and let's go and run around and let's do 20 days shooting or whatever, and 20 staff and all that sort of stuff. And then obviously that's then suddenly that ambition has got to get filtered down into like real world. And then a producer gets upset with me because I've given them the problem instead of myself.
Yeah, they love that, I
hear. But, I guess in terms of picking that, to get back to that question, it's like, do you get to pick that? Or does it pick you? Do the clients pick you in that regards? Or
I think it's kind of 50-50 really. I think some people, I know that there's companies that have, so I'm working with people now that I hadn't worked with the place I was prior. And that's all to do with like agency relationships with post-production houses. And also now, especially at Envy, because the place I was before didn't have a VFX department and a sound department, and they were just purely about color. Whereas now there's almost like a package deal to be had. So I think maybe perhaps like a job might, for example, come into Envy that they really want like Arj or Rich to work on, because they're incredible. But they might not have worked with me or Danny before, for example, for color. So if they really want to do Arj and Rich, but they've got, maybe they've got a different budget that doesn't necessarily cater for all of it, there's package deals that'll then get had for like, well, if we do the VFX, we do the sound and the color. So sometimes I think directors will end up going to a different post house, not necessarily with the colorist they want, but maybe they'll have the sound person they want. But then I know also like some director friends of mine that have really started putting their foot down recently and being like, no, very much part of what I do comes from working with Jax on the color that she puts on my films. That's what you're coming to me for, in the same way that they will for the sound. So then in which case they'll break it apart and they'll go elsewhere. And I think that's one thing that Greg at Envy's been trying to do more, is make each department their own little boutiques, as well as being, we can do everything, but we don't necessarily have to do everything. We have unique teams.
I guess there's definitely a point we're trying to get to with that as well. It's like, in a roundabout way, my conversation in that regard is trying to identify that why, because ultimately it's so important that people get to pick the right creative staff for the task that they're trying to achieve. And obviously so much of that, in my experience, has been to do with relationships.
Huge.
You have a rapport with a person and they understand your style, but it's not, whilst there is a book of terminology, it's not always how what you remember. It might be like, you just do that blah blah thing, and then they're like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. But that doesn't happen straight away, and you need to develop a relationship with someone, right?
But every colorist is different. Like, the differences between me and Danny, he does things that I'm like, what? How? Why? What is that? Like, he does things I'd never even heard of before coming to Envy. In the same way that I'm quite intense with my grain. My filmic reproduction.
This, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of my thing. I'm quite specific about how I approach replicating film. I don't just throw grain on the end of it. I feel like when you're trying to replicate a film stock, it's not just about film grain. It's about the texture of the film, as well as, you might have a halation in. If it's 16mm, you've definitely got halation. So if you're throwing a 16mm grain onto some stock footage, what is that? It's not going to look like 16mm.
And different stock panels, highlights in different ways and stuff like that, right?
Exactly. So you'd have like more of a glow on a highlight. There's so many different ways. So my grain layers will be like, they can get quite extensive, like 20 layers sometimes. And this is something that, that's my look, and that's what I've been working on for several years, whereas Danny's looks a lot cleaner, for example. So if not saying that Danny can't replicate film, because he does a really good job of, replicating film, but he does it in his own way, in a very different way to the way that I do it. So if you're coming for a certain look, I think you should use a certain colorist for that look. Like, I don't think people come to me for really clean grades. I don't think, not to say that I can't do them, I just don't think it's what I'm known for.
But I think that's a surefire sign of the level as well, isn't it? Like, at certain levels, you're going to pick people versus, what you're trying to get from them. You're not trying to say to them, oh, can you do this? It's like, no, I'm coming to you for this purpose. And,
exactly.
I get that's a huge part of kind of, what I'm trying to help communicate to, well, not just the listeners, but just generally people. It's like so much of a learning curve in what I understood about the industry and about, all the different processes as I've worked my way through it, is that each person has their job for a reason. But so much of that, it's like, come on, guys, this is a creative and collaborative industry, and each person should have their creative process within that. And the amount of times I've been in grading suites, I've been like thrown in for like half a day to do a job that should have taken 3 days. And it's like, nice to meet you. Let's go. And you're like,
oh God.
Should we go for like a Rec 709 then, I guess? Let's just get it nice and clean.
Yeah, I tend to not go in for that much. But then that's something that I'm quite lucky that I do tend to liaise with the producers beforehand, and they'll send me a whip or they'll give me as much information, and they'll always ask me how long I think I'm going to need for something. So the chances, I think we brushed on this slightly earlier, where, you know, as much as there's different colorists, there's different producers. So a producer that produces long form broadcaster, for example, will bill a job and will quote a job very differently to a producer that it works only on short form. Because on a broadcast job, it's all about, you know, matching, getting it like super, I don't know. It's not really as in depth. So they won't spend like.
They're just looking for a real representation, more or less, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're trying to make it look good, of course, but they're more
not as
about
heavily stylized, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas in an ad, you could spend easily half an hour debating just how red a tomato could be, which sounds really superficial. But if you're on an ad for a tomato brand, then that's their brand color, and it's got to be perfect. And that tomato has been put in every frame, so you've got to make it exactly the same. It's a weird reference, but yeah.
I was like, you referencing something specific here? I
was trying to keep it unbranded.
Need a bit of therapy with this one? Was there a bit?
I had a really tough tomato grade, guys.
It does. It does reveal a lot, though, and it's something which I'm happy we can share with people. Is like just how much is not only involved in the process, but kind of, for me, is a pain, because it's more often than not one of the things that's chiefly overlooked, yet so unbelievably critical. It's like you've got your, for want of a better word, your digital negative, and now you're putting it to the next process, and it's the final part in the puzzle.
Exactly.
And it's like the thing that dictates quite literally what it looks like, and people are happy to skim there. It's like, whoa.
A bad colorist can ruin a grade. Like, they can ruin your piece. Like, I've seen some shocking grades that have gone out, and you're like, I'm pretty sure the Rec 709 would have looked better than that. Not going to name any names.
It's all good. I could already see what I was like, we're not gonna rant here. We're not gonna
we promised we weren't gonna rant about iPhone footage and bad grades.
What do you mean? You mean if I came to you with my iPhone footage, you'd be like, say I call you up tomorrow and I've shot this feature-length documentary on my iPhone. How are you feeling about that, Jax?
I mean, I'd be very polite on the phone, but I would be rolling my eyes from the back of my head.
It's quite funny because I think more than one person has said on this show that their favorite camera at the moment is their iPhone, which I completely sympathize with. It's a great tool for capturing things, but it's not a professional tool.
Horses for courses. An iPhone is great when you can't get an Alexa, but if you imagine if you can afford an Alexa and you can have an Alexa, then what you're trying to do with your footage has so much more possibility. And, are you really expecting to project your iPhone footage in a cinema? Are you, if you didn't get your crop exactly right, do you really think that's going to hold up if you've got to punch in slightly? And don't even get me started on if you didn't balance it right, because you are pretty much locked into that grade. I
realize that we're getting onto this is like we're just getting really bitchy really fast.
Yeah. I love iPhone, honestly, I promise.
It's all right.
No, it's good. The thing is, there's a time and a place for, every camera has its own specific time and place, and iPhone definitely has its time and place at the moment, but please let it not just be the time and place post lockdown.
And the audience has to understand where this is coming from. That's the thing. We're talking about advertising. We're talking about people that are, going out and shooting this stuff and going like, oh, this being encouraged to do so rather than the opposite way around. So that's the thing.
I think if you can't shoot anything, then an iPhone is great. If you have no access to anything, then shooting on an iPhone is better than shooting nothing. But if you're making that conscious decision to go, I'm going to get an extra $5,000 in my bank account if I shoot it on my iPhone rather than stump up a little bit and shoot it on an Alexa, then that's a terrible mistake.
That's an interesting way to put it. And I'm not sure we're quite there yet, but sure, I'm enjoying what you said.
Future, like the longevity of whatever it is you're shooting. If you aim to, do anything serious with it. I'm getting really ranty about iPhone footage. I promised I wasn't going to do this.
It's good fun. It's good fun. I think, the premise that we're trying to achieve here is ultimately that horses for courses situation, yes. Isn't it? And I think the kind of question that goes along with it for me is probably like, and where this kind of ranting comes from is more when to up your game. Because it's like, at what point in your career do you need that next tool? And I feel like this is a big, topic of conversation within the industry, because it's really easy to go like, I don't know when I need that thing. But a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to go like, I need that great thing. And that great thing is going to make me amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to completely go back on myself now and say, if your end product is an Instagram video, and that's all it's ever going to get used for, and it's only ever going to be online, and, reality is it's never going to be bigger than your laptop screen, then why are you shooting that on an 8K red? That's going to cost you a lot of money. It's going to eat into data. There's multiple, like workflow wise, that's going to be really system intensive for the colorist, because obviously 8K footage, it takes a lot longer to grade. It takes a lot longer to edit. It takes a lot longer to export. It uses up countless amounts of hard drive space. So if you know that whatever it is that you're shooting is only ever going to go on Instagram, and your options are, I don't know, your iPhone, a C300.
I love that you're now picking cameras out of the air. Come on, keep going.
An Alexa or a Red. Like, I'm always going to go Alexa, but the Red should be the last case.
Showing some bias here.
Well, just because, Alexa shoots ProRes, it's easy. You can kick it straight over. It's simple. It's a simple workflow as well. Like, that's one of the reasons why I love
find
Alexa.
Interesting about the post-production workflow on the Red, though, is that a lot of that does come into contention. I feel like, I don't know, it's really strange. Like, obviously 8K, I mean, maybe let's have that quick conversation in terms of if someone actually gives you 8K as an acquisition format, like, why is it necessarily labor intensive? It's good for us to understand, from your perspective as a post house.
It's the data.
I'm not getting too tech and too nerdy.
I mean, ideally with the Red, you want to be using a Red rocket. So there's more system requirements that you need. It's obviously, you're talking 8K worth of data. So it's the files are huge. So if you've got a render on any, pretty much any machine, you're aiming to have real-time playback, especially in like today's world where a lot of what we're doing is remote grading. You don't want to be remote grading 8K footage, really, because it's the data that you're having to, it's just huge. So I
guess the question there as well, just to help the audience out a little bit, at that point in time, is it the resolution, or is it the raw, or is it like, which bit of it's the painful part on the computer, the computing system?
All of it is the honest answer. It's because you've got to debayer it, and it's the raw of the Red as well. You can get into, there's a lot of information, which is great. Don't get me wrong, having a lot of information if you're shooting for IMAX is brilliant, but having all of that information if you're shooting for an iPhone that will never see that extra information is pointless.
It's interesting, honestly, to hear from your perspective where that comes in, especially from a post side. Like, from your perspective, does the ProRes package have enough within it? I mean, obviously, if you're providing that you've got the other, you know what, I'm going to straight into that one. One of the questions from my perspective was, I was lucky enough to hear this from a gentleman called Dada Valensik and have that conversation with him about, like, early on in my career, about what is the most important thing if I'm coming to you with footage as an acquisition format, like in order of preference, to get a real nice digital negative. And like, we're talking about things like, because obviously the resolution conflict comes into it, but then like we're talking about bit depth, color bit depth. Like, what are the most important things from your perspective if someone's bringing you some footage?
For me, shot right, top of the list.
Okay.
Then I don't have to do as much recovery.
Exposure, right?
Exposure. Keep making sure your white balance. If you're shooting ProRes, make sure that your white balance is set simultaneously, because it's all good having your exposure the same, but there's still a lot of faffing about our end. If your white balance is all over the show, that's obviously going to take longer to grade. Raw footage obviously is at the top, mainly because we can then fix a lot of those mistakes on the fly. So
if we're ProRes, we're baked in, right? That's the thing.
If you're ProRes, you're locked in. If you're shooting red, I would always ask for the raw footage, because what you're shooting there, I'm probably going to change.
This is a very important part of the conversation. It's a lot of things that, like, I find myself having this conversation a lot with trainees, a lot of people coming through the ranks. And I want to mention any names, but you've seen a few auto white balances on some things and you're like, yeah, I know. It's like understanding that that's immediately destructive. As soon as you've got to change that, it kind of gets back into this point of conversation. It's like, as soon as you've got to change anything, it's destructive, right? And again, I know a lot of people understand this about this, but there's a lot of people that don't. And this raw conversation versus your, RGB codec that's baked in. It's like there's contention here for a good reason. It's like, if you're not, if you haven't done it right, exposure or white balance, etc., ISO, all things that we can change.
Yeah.
Change, even though we should have exposed them right. There are all things that we can change within RAW, but within ProRes we can't, right?
Well, even down to the color science that comes out of the red camera. You've got so many different varieties. So you can shoot with a rec look on set, and then if you create a ProRes from that to send to your colorist, you've baked that look in. Whereas in the raw file, we can change all of that, and that's not, it's like pushing.
And that's advantageous, right.
Yeah,
I mean, getting into this horses for courses,
malleable,
advantageous, right?
Definitely more advantageous. The more you can give your colorist, the better your grade is going to be. But if you imagine you're on the clock, so every change takes time. So if your white balance is all over the show on your 3-minute short film, for example, then you're going to be looking at a good 45 minutes, potentially up to 45 minutes of that going through, because depending on how many cuts you've got, balancing, just making sure. Whereas if you've shot that seamlessly, then all of that time is being spent on the creative rather than the fixing.
The question for me as well on the white balance one, say you've got two slightly off white balances and you're in, the ProRes codec, so you're baked in.
Yeah.
Is it actually possible to match them the exact same if you're in two white balance spaces?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. It was one I wanted to answer.
No. You can definitely match it. It's just it's when you're on the clock talking like we were before, saying that sometimes you don't feel like you've got enough time. It's if everything is shot well and this in a similar world, then all of that time is just dedicated to enhancing as opposed to fixing. So it's not to say that you won't be able to do that. It's just that then eats into your creative time.
And it's trying to just communicate this point of it being destructive as well. It's like that is degrading the image at a certain point, but it's just like, how tangible is that?
It's, well, if you think once it's at ProRes state, every single thing that you do is degrading the footage until it's spat back out again. So, even a white balance tweak it's minimal degradation, but it is still degradation. Whereas if you're doing that on a raw level, then that's all there baked into the raw data. Sorry, is that what you're looking for?
It's all good. It's all right. I'm just like trying to find the answer to these questions. That's the thing. Like, you and I both know that you can get into this incredibly technically, but there is a fundamental level which is required for understanding. And it's like a lot of people just kind of get that mixed up. They get focused, way too hard on the wrong information, or become like, I've got to do it this way or whatever. It's like when all you need to really do was learn how photography works and then how exposure works.
Yes. I think all colorists should spend a day on set at least in their life. I think my years of being on set as a photo assistant and learning about light has helped me to no ends in my career now as a colorist. And understanding why the DP will have done something in a certain, because I feel like you also, as a colorist, like we've brushed on before, you can destroy an image. And sometimes you'll see colorists are trying to relight what the DP's tried to do. And they should really be looking for where the light is coming from and what the DP is trying to do, and then just enhancing what's there, as opposed to completely, unless obviously the DP's gone, I didn't have time on the day, I'm so sorry, we had like an hour to shoot this artist and the light's in completely the wrong place, what can you do? Then I'm saying that's happened once or twice, but
I feel like we need to like do almost a how-to on how to recover like when you haven't got light, but at the same time I feel like we don't encourage that either.
Yeah, let's not. And like day for nights, for example, there's yes, day for nights are possible, but if you're shooting into a setting sun, then making that look like nighttime is going to be pretty difficult.
That moonlight was really bright that day.
Yeah. And that shadow was intense.
It's like 5 stops under there.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. Again,
I mean, I could make a whole book out of stupid client requests, things like that. I had one about 2 days ago from a client asking me, so the sun is in shot. It's a girl, she's running past the sun. And it was all like a really warm, like, you know, sunset vibes. And the client came out like, yeah, it's supposed to be middle of the day. Like, but the sun's here. Yeah, and the shadows are like way down there. What middle of the day country are you in?
I feel like we're asking too much of the suspension of disbelief here.
This is the thing. And it's like, yeah, we can make it cooler. We can do that. And we can make it appear like it's the middle of the day. But anybody with half a brain is going to go, hang about, why is the sun there if it's the middle of the day? And then you've lost your audience because they've snapped out of the reality that you've created.
Was that shot thrown in like during a midday type thing you're saying? Like, and it was like they ran out of time on the day and they ran over and they were like, oh, we're just trying
it was just
shooting, or the whole shoot was the wrong time of day?
Just the wrong time of day.
Okay, the whole shoot was the wrong time of day. Oh, okay, fair enough.
I think that was probably one of those. No, I think it was probably one of those, like the client had something in their head that they just didn't voice to anyone. You know, when you get that feedback and you're like, oh, everyone's a little shumped by it.
You know what? It's so funny as well, because like I feel like this is something that has been ever evolving and ever changing, and not necessarily in the right ways. But I know a big conversation I'm having with different people is kind of how they are communicating their own means and methods for all these different reasons. Obviously, there's a creative intention in the beginning, and ultimately, it's really all about kind of like getting that concept, whatever creative writing it might have been at the beginning, through to the end, and it's kind of as close to that thought process as possible. Of course, you're going to have different creative inputs throughout the way there, but keeping hold of that, like there's an image in someone's head that needs to kind of get to the finish line. I feel like that has been the longest and biggest lesson in my entire career. It's like trying to, I initially micromanage that process, like trying to do too much. Like I need to really, then, you know, there's a gentleman called Stefan Bonini who was on an earlier podcast with us. He's a really good friend of mine, as a bit of a mentor. And he was really able to go into sort of like, just communicate as early as possible you can your working methods as concisely as you can. And if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. And it's so much just about like not sticking to your guns, but just kind of knowing what you should be signing up for.
Yeah, definitely. and having said that, you know, for us as colorists, we sometimes will get sent a treatment halfway through a grade and you're like, why are you sending me this now? Why didn't you send me this before the grade so I can have a look and at least then know like what
the creative intention.
Yeah. So like know what you guys set out to do to begin with. So the client will have seen that creative, signed off on that creative. And so I need to try and stay true to that rather than receive that, 3 hours into a 4-hour grade and go, oh, so it's supposed to be really light and poppy, but we all feel like it looks cooler, dark and moody, but client's going to completely wig out when they see this.
Someone's not going to have a good time when they see this.
Yeah, even though we think it looks great, like that kind of wasn't the point, was it, guys?
Again, the other side of this that we're understanding is it totally happens at every level of production.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Like someone
you can
just
get carried away.
Email at the right time and they were like, there's a treatment attached to this description. Oh no.
Oops. And it's the way they're like, oh, sorry, I totally forgot to send you that. Like, yeah, no, it wasn't really important at all.
Nah, not at all. That visual reference that depicted the absolute color tone and palette of the entire piece.
Yeah. That Pantone that the client's been banging on about the whole shoot. Yeah, no, really glad you didn't send me that. But to be fair, you do get a lot of really good, like I'm talking about the bad times. You get a lot of, sometimes you do get information overload and I get scripts sent to me and I'm like, I don't really need that. I just need your mood board.
But that is part of the process, though, isn't it? You know, like what is in your ideal world, what's someone giving you as that reference? Is it just a mood board and some visual references with some other, other grades attached? Or is it like getting into it? Do you want to have a meeting with those people? Are we going to have a proper conversation about these things?
I would always love to have a chat prior to the grade because, you can get a treatment and the treatment will have been sent to the client, but then the treatment doesn't necessarily tell me what's happened on the shoot day, because from what's happened in that treatment that's been sent to what's happened on set, there's so many decisions that will be made. So many variables, what was happening in the treatment might not necessarily have been working on set. So they could have, people change things on the fly all the time.
Of course,
that's why we do what we do. So for me personally, I would always love a chat, and I love to chat with the director and I love to chat with the DP. Personally, the best grades for me are when both of those people are involved, because obviously the director has the vision for the story that they've created, but then the DP has created that world with them on set and can, help guide me with, some lighting decisions, or, I tried to gel up that light to really, enhance, this color. Is there any way you can window that and you can make that stronger? All of that will come from the DP rather than the director. And I do find sometimes, especially in advertising, that they're almost sometimes forgotten about. And it's really quite upsetting when you don't get to have all of that information, because then when you start the grade, you're in the strongest possible place to begin. And if people can't be with me in the room, I always love to have everyone in the room, mainly because it's just good banter as well. But if everyone can't be with me, what I'd love to see is examples, great examples, because you can get a really quick idea for somebody's style when they send you a collection. There's normally a thread that runs throughout all the images. They're like, I like this, I like this, I like this.
Yeah.
And as a colorist, you can pick out like, oh, okay, I see you're into a milky shadow. You like a bloomy highlight. You like quite desaturated. Like you can pick up on what people like, and then you know then where your starting point should be.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating to get that insight, because again, it's something that which from, certainly from my perspective, and a lot of people like myself are harping on about the whole time. It's like this relationship needs to be cultivated. It's not something that can be secondary. What we should there should be certain people that are implemented in the process, straight away from the get-go, but so often forgotten about. So it's good to know what sort of a follow-up, I guess, in that regard is, how do you go about finding and just cultivating these relationships with those kinds of people? Is it very much through the company you work with, or do you have personal relationships? And
they're both really. I love an awards.
Yeah.
Who doesn't? You meet a lot of people at social networking events. I used to meet a lot of people down in the pubs in Soho, but that's not a thing at the moment, sadly. But I've got relationships. I'm still really good pals with the director of my first ever music video that was graded in, actually back to the basics, graded in a corner of my living room off a laptop.
It will start somewhere.
Plastic panel. Well, you do, like when you're first starting out, you'll just do whatever you can do. That actually got nominated for a UK MVA, that video as well.
All right.
Well, I'm still really good pals with her, and still really good pals with a lot of the directors that I've worked with over the years.
What was the music video? DOPs. What was it?
It was called Hon, was the band, All in the Value. And the director was Jax Harney. If you don't know her, you should, because she's fab.
That's what I'm saying. We got to shout these people out. We got to go check them out. Even just to criticize your work.
Yeah, I'm going to highlight it was graded on
It's
it was good. Like,
it's important that the audience understands to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere with these sorts of things. And like you said, if it's still
but that was shot on an Alexa on ProRes.
I guess what's interesting as well.
Still my favorite tool.
Do you have any tips for those people who that is their only option? They're just starting out and they love the idea of coloring, but I mean, you know as well as I do that they're not. The positions of color graders are few and far between, and like you do have to stand out before someone's going to give you a shot. Like, what about this person who just has a laptop and, you know, I don't want to say Premiere, but like maybe has got himself a free version of DaVinci Resolve or something like that. Like,
hey, I graded that on the free version of DaVinci Resolve. You can export up to, I think it's up to 4K now on the free version. I'd say the best thing you can do if you're starting out and you're serious about getting into color grading, the most important thing to do, first of all, is get yourself a panel. Because what you can do with a panel...
So we're talking monitors? Or the control panel?
Control panel.
Sorry,
I mean, a grade monitor is obviously priority. So
that's what I'm saying.
That's just, Sorry, a grading monitor is going to be your go-to. Like, first of all, you don't have to spend like, $100,000 on the best monitor to start with though. Like, I started out on an ISO as a photography monitor. I think it cost me it was still about 800 quid, but that, if you're looking at color critical work, then
investing in yourself in that regard, like the difference is, as you've said, 800 quid versus your conventional grade monitor, which is 10 grand plus.
Yeah, easy. Yeah,
to start with. That's what I'm saying, right?
Well, with all the kit that goes with it, yeah. I mean,
oh, of course, yeah, right. And that's the thing. It's like, again, just to sort of help people out back home, those people are looking at those monitors. What are they looking for? Obviously, I'm aware that HDR is a thing, but you aren't going to get for 800
you're not going to
you're grading monitor for HDR.
And also, if you're grading in your bedroom, you're not doing color accurate HDR work. So stop. Like, it's like,
bring it up. Yeah. Now we're getting into it.
The thing is, if you're starting to grade HDR, you need to be on definitely a grade 1 monitor.
Oh, we'll skip HDR in a minute. Let's just start our basic guys that are at home. They're shooting on their digital SLRs or their sort of like Blackmagics or something like that.
Yeah, get yourself I'm a champion of an ISO. I loved an ISO. It did me wonders for starting out. I graded, God, I can't even count how many projects I graded on it. I had an ISO, I had a plastic wave panel. I had it all hooked up to my laptop. I just had a MacBook Pro. And I was, obviously if you're starting out, you're not taking on 8K red footage. Like you're not doing that sort of work at that level. So your system hardware doesn't need to be at that level. So, I can still bang out a pretty good grade on my laptop now, but you've got to have it hooked up to a color accurate monitor. That is rule 101, is that has to be calibrated. It has to be in a room that isn't painted fluorescent pink. And
come on, I know why. Tell me why. You can tell the audience why, because I know why.
So you need to, ideally, if you're really getting techy into it, you want your room painted a specific gray Pantone, which will neutralize the eye, will neutralize the environment.
Color reflections, right?
Yeah, you want it to be blacked out. So everything that you're looking at, if you're looking at your screen and your wall is orange behind, or let's say your wall is pink behind, right? And you're looking at your screen, your eye and your brain will be mentally doing a calculation to subtract the pink that you're seeing from what you're seeing. Like that, it will be happening inside your head. You won't even realize you're doing it. And so before you know it, you'll have added way too much green into your workflow.
You'll add it in a hue, right?
Yeah. The best way to test this, to know what I'm talking about, is if you get a really vibey color and then put it just in your eye line and stare at it and then shift your eyes, and you'll get like a blink of a different color, and it'll be the opposite color to the color that you're looking at. And that's what your brain is doing constantly.
Yeah, a negative version, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So if you're looking at something that's really blue, you'll get a yellow. That happens all the time. So we say 18% gray and keep it dark, but don't go black, because the minute you go black, you're then going to be going overboard on contrast the display as well. Yeah. So you just want your room. Yeah. You just want your room to be, like a low level gray. easy on the eye. Get yourself a little light behind if you can, that's daylight balanced. If you're getting really serious, that will help with eye strain. And then grade away, get cracking, get on resolve.
I'm so happy you just said that. That was like, we nailed some solid advice there. Look at
yes. Boom.
It's so important to understand that there is such a straightforward procedure. And I keep having these conversations with people that they just don't know where to start. And they might have started. And then there's a next bit and they're like, I've got loads of questions and I don't know what to do next. Or like I said, I've got a few people around me at the moment that sort of juniors in different departments, whether it be edit, whether it be camera, and they're trying to work out which direction suits them. Even basic stuff like we talked about with your photographic background, and you understood that about your own personality, that, there's a part of it that really calls out to you. It's the retouching, it's the post-production part of it. It's delivering that color element. I know that isn't as obvious for some people because it's just not, because I know that there's like a lot of different things that people enjoy about it, but it's okay to enjoy watching a movie and being like, I like stories. Yeah. Being like, actually, you know what? Do I like telling stories? Can I be a good storyteller? Or am I well suited to another element of this production process? Like, I'm really well organized. You should probably produce.
Exactly. I can never produce.
This is what I'm saying, because the reality is like, how many of us are like useless at organizing our time, organizing our space, organizing our stuff? Like, even in the house, how many times do you forget stuff? And you're just like, I'm just going to distract myself by doing the laundry right now. And I'm now 20 minutes late for something.
During lockdown, I've missed my producers telling me where I should be and what I should be doing.
I think it's probably a trained skill as well. I think it's probably one of those situations where like, if you get really bad at it because the producer's telling you what to do all the time, you probably do get worse at it.
Yeah, I think so. You become reliant.
I'm not sure. Maybe there's an ADHD.
They're enablers. That's what they are. That's all.
Your lunch order, Jax. Don't worry. You don't have to think about eating anymore. It's like, why am I? I certainly do appreciate that, because there's a creative question that comes into that as well. Obviously, there's a point in time where you have to start asking yourself questions of, how do I develop? Where do I get that feedback from? Was there a point in time in your career where you sort of like, obviously awards, you mentioned those are an incredible position to put yourself in, like, oh, cool, I can put this out there and someone can tell me whether they like it or not. And obviously working with an incredible director, and that's up to you to decide. And you were lucky enough to find these different kinds of people down the roadside there. But was there a point in time where you're like, is this good enough? Am I ready for a job doing this? Or did that happen quite sort of naturally and organically?
Oh God, I suffer massively with imposter syndrome, but I don't think I know a colorist that doesn't really. I personally,
it's common in the industry for sure. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm constantly second guessing if anything I do is good enough. I go to award ceremonies. I love seeing what everybody's done. I love to see, Simon Bourne, I think is absolutely incredible. And I feel like every award ceremony I go to, he cleans up and I'm like, will I ever be as good as him?
Stop comparing yourself, Jax. You're really good.
Thanks.
Praise right now. It's all good.
I think for me, especially when I first started out, I did a lot of training. So I trained with the ICA with Kevin Shaw.
What is that?
So International Colourist Academy. It's run by
Colourist Academy. It's all good.
Yeah, Kevin Shaw and Warren Eagle. And it's like, for me going, so I sort of did a couple of the they'll remain unnamed, and I did another training that wasn't great for me. I found that it was very technical on how to do something, whereas I think a lot of what we do is, I think you can find a lot of technical information online. You can Google, especially with results.
Yourself, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You can Google. You can figure out really quickly how to set up your monitor, like things like that. But what you might not necessarily find out, like information on, like, is how do I do a bleach bypass? Like, I hear people asking for it all the time. How do I do that?
Or what is a bleach bypass?
Or what is a bleach bypass? You know, what is cross-process? Like, what are these technical
terms? Where does that
terms
actually come from? That's the other thing as well, right?
Exactly. Like, what's the history behind that? And I think things like that, you can scroll YouTube and there are 1,000,001 like different tutorials on how to do different looks. But for me, what I found really interesting was going with the ICA, and I learned the fundamentals of what color grading is all about and like why we do what we do. And that was quite important for me learning, with coming from a retouching angle. And you do, I think, in a stills capacity, when you're retouching a still, and I came from beauty as well, so I did a lot of hair campaigns. And
taking straight hairs out, you mean, stuff like that? Yeah.
Oh God, I do not miss those days.
I'm sorry, I just watched a bit of your soul disappear there.
Did you? Just went out the window, just flew away. But so, you know, we spent hours getting that meticulously right, and every single pixel had to be perfect. Mm-hmm. And the first thing that I think when I first started out in motion that I learned quite quickly was every frame moves. So not every frame has to be perfect. It just has to work as one.
Work together, yeah. As a shot.
Yeah, so that meticulous side of me that I'd spent years honing, I got to kind of just loosen up a bit, and it was great. But it wasn't until going and learning with Kevin and seeing them work and raising questions on, like, because I was talking about skin and was like, but she's got a pimple and it shows up like on that tiny little frame there. And he's like, yeah, because we're pores on that frame.
That's her face.
And that is her face. But whereas I'm like, no, I come from X hairdressing campaigns that shall remain unnamed, where people do not have pores.
Yeah, right. Oh, man.
But if, you know, learning things like if it's on the move, if you freeze on it and it bothers you, then if you've got time, get rid of it. But if you don't see it when it's on the move, then if you've only got 4 hours, why are you spending 3 of them getting rid of that spot? And that's the kind of stuff that I learned from Kevin and Warren, which was, it was the sort of why we do what we do and how to spend your time. Yeah. Well, just also, like, you know, because I don't feel like anybody ever talks about pricing and structure and time and those kind of aspects of the job of being a colorist that you have to kind of weigh up. Because
which
obviously
would be pretty horrible to go into a competitive and real world environment and go like, oh, by the way, you got 5 minutes.
Yeah. And also when you're first starting out, like what's the normal, what's expected? And I've still got a notebook from the class that I remember Kevin breaking down, like, on an advertising job, you'll generally spend this amount of time. And on a BBC doc, you're expected to do this amount per episode. And all of that I found really helpful for me as somebody starting out in the industry.
Taking the guesswork out, right?
Yeah, well, because otherwise you're
allows you to focus on the good stuff, right? The things you should be thinking about, right?
Exactly. So, you know, hats off to those guys. They run a really good course for anybody starting out. I think things like that are good sources of information to go to.
Did you ever get into the creative side? I mean, more so like how the creative color, you know, how colors are used creatively to determine different, you know, atmospheres, moods, or tones, or you know, feelings or emotions, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, on those courses that you cover all those things. There's also loads of brilliant books out about
that. For me was like a big revelation in understanding my first proper conversation with, you know, what I would consider the first point in time where you interact with the colorist, because at a certain point in time you're not doing that, and then suddenly you're introduced to it and it's like, okay, how do I talk to you?
The language of the colorist.
What do you need to know? I like that contrast, and that color's pretty cool.
Learning all of our buzzwords. Is that highlight a bit hot?
A really important part of the process to me was understanding that how much control you guys have over that, like I said, that emotion and that feeling within the shot, and how much you can change it. And like how much of that process I really fundamentally enjoy when I'm working with someone like yourself. And it's like, you know, we have our palette and the things that were dictated by art direction, the things that got us to like the general vibe, you know, the general look of the scene or whatever it might have been. And then it's like, right, now let's really get into it. and like what are we trying to communicate with this scene and those things, and the disparity, and even the same shot that you can communicate two completely different things, and obviously we're not just talking about color, we're talking about everything that comes together with sound. We're talking about sound design, we're talking about the audio that's going on, the visuals, how the shot is moving and things. But very
sound and color go hand in hand for me. Right? I hate it's like my worst bugbear is getting a cut without sound, because if there's nobody in the room with me that can tell me where that tension needs to build, then I need the sound, because that sound leads the color, and I feel like the color leads the sound. There's no point in me doing like a really pastel, poppy, pretty grade, and then I hear the music, it's like dun 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 dun, and you're like, oh, okay, that was supposed to be quite a stressful moment, and I've made it like sickly pink.
And it's now an emotional contrast that's just confusing the audience.
Yeah, and all of a sudden the audience is like, I don't know what's going on here anymore. I'm questioning all my life choices. I wish one of my grades could promote that kind of a reaction.
It's all right. We all have ambitions, Jax. We all have
That's it. That's my aim for the week.
I'm looking forward to sharing this with the audience as well. It's like Jax went out there and her ambition was to create something really cerebral. I coined that term from Netflix, by the way, and I was checking it out. It's like, what's cerebral about this show? We'll call it that. We're just throwing it out there. We'd like to find something. And techie buzzwords that just confuse and conflict everything.
Word of the week, cerebral grades. I'm going to see if I can get that into a client chat this week.
Please do. You can report back on that as well.
I might try and like secretly record it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
sorry, I'm trying you off now.
No, it's just so funny to see the different tangents that we go on as well. It's good fun. It's like, it's such a hugely important part of the process, this as well. It's like, I mean, I spoke to you privately before this just to have a quick conversation. That's why we keep alluding to things that we spoke about before. But it's just so how much of that really becomes part of the creative process that when we are interacting, and how much of it the audience, so to speak, or just like generally, I didn't understand. So I'm hoping that we can bring it to people to, give them a bit of insight on things that we get. And we kind of forget that like are in our little bubble, especially when you're in, especially the level you're at, when you're dealing with the kind of projects you're dealing with. It's like, okay, yeah, there's that thing that I kind of forgot when I first started. But if someone is just starting out, or even is at a level where they're aspiring to be, they're already working in a color environment or a post-production environment, and they're looking to sort of, the way that you're enamored by the colorists cleaning up at the award ceremonies. The way that you're looking at it, they're like, oh, I want to be that guy. There's people looking at you going like, hell yeah, I want to be Jax. Like for sure there's people. But you know what I'm saying? Like we all look up to different people within the industry, and there's definitely going to be some insight that you're going to glean from this and go, you know what? I'm going to go and do that next step or find out what that thing is. So it's really super helpful to identify those things that just eliminate a bit of the guesswork for people, for sure. So thank you for sharing.
Hopefully it's helpful.
Have you, again, just like bring the audience a bit more into it. It's like predominantly what you do is advertising, right? So a lot of commercials, things like that. You do like shorts and features and stuff?
Yeah, anything. So MV split into two groups. You've got MV Broadcast, and they do all the long form projects, and then MV Advertising. So we do pretty much anything under 30 minutes. So promos, music videos, promos of music videos. I forget the buzzwords. Advertising, shorts, docs, anything. I mean, it's not to say that I can't do features and I can't do long form. It's just kind of have a short attention span, so I don't like to take on too many.
I feel like you have to enlighten me on that process now. Obviously, those processes are going to be different. Like you said, like the attention to detail that you can afford, and you've already explained that you've clearly got a vast attention to detail when it comes down to your grain levels and layers and things like that. But is that a surefire sign that your processes aren't necessarily matched to features, or like do you have the ambitions of working on features and stuff?
Never say never. I flit and change my opinions quite often, but at the moment, because I like to be so specific and go into such minute details on things. That style is more suited to a short form job, purely because of the timescale on how long you have to do things. So the broadcast world, for example, will get half the time that an advert. So, they might do a 30-minute episode in a day, whereas I might do a 30-second ad. That's the kind of difference in time. But, you know, in
you're understanding why I'm pushing
minutes.
you with this one, Jax, right? You understand I'm pushing you to be like, yeah, I'll grade your feature, Josh. I'm like, yes, we need that ridiculous level of amazingness in an hour and a half. That's what I need. I don't need you. I need you for a feature. That's what we're talking about.
Hey, if you've got about 4 months, then
I'll make that time for you, Jax. I will make that time.
Why do I feel like that's going to be all of my evenings for the next 4 months?
Here's what I'm saying, Jax. I'm making problems for producers. That's not my problem anymore. We need 4 months in the grade. Is that okay?
Yeah. Let's have my producers talk to your producers.
How long does it?
This is what it comes down to, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. How long does it actually take for a, like a typical feature film to be graded?
I think, you're looking at minimum 3 weeks, bare minimum. But because I'm not really a features person. I'm probably the worst person to ask, because I would probably ask for a year, and it would be the most labor intensive piece of art you will ever see.
I look forward to that day.
I mean, I don't know. I'd love to know, like, how long, for example, Jill Bogdanovich had on the Joker. Like, girl fan, huge on her, and would love to know, like, how long she was allowed to do that, because I think that is like an absolute masterpiece.
We can find out the power of the internet. We're going to talk to a lovely gentleman called Tyler Roth from Company 3, who worked on the marketing campaign for Joker. So
brilliant. Pick his brains. Let me know. I want to know how long she had.
I'll be like, hey, Jill, what's up?
Yeah, tell him to go and knock on her door and ask her how long she had for.
They are. I've been trying to sort this out for a few weeks now. They're so hard to communicate with, because obviously he's working the same as yourself. You guys are busy right now. So, like, of course, I'm incredibly grateful for your time right now. But trying to work out the time difference, as well as working out how we can get, like, either a pre-record, like, live's basically impossible with what they guys are dealing with over there. But he's totally up for it soon. So we're going to have a conversation with him. The guys at Company 3 out there are insanely amazing, and I'm really glad to sort of contrast with you guys and have those kind of conversations, because they're not vastly far apart in terms of what you guys are doing at all. It's just different stuff, just different parts of the industry. That's really cool. Yeah,
I mean, there's so many different areas of this industry that you can go into. I didn't realize how different broadcast was because when I say long form, like there's broadcast long form, and then there's your feature long form. They're two very different beasts as well as a music video.
Go into it. Like in terms of long form being like a broadcast long form being like an hour TV show or whatever.
I mean, I doff my cap to the guys who do long form at MV, because I think because I fixate on tiny details too much. Like, I can't unsee something once I've seen it, and I would it's in my nature to have to go in, and that's why things take longer, because I can't just let it go. And so the way that they create the shows and make them look amazing in half an hour, like a half an hour episode in a day, I'm just like, how do you do that? Whereas, in the same sense, I think if you gave them a 30-second ad and a whole day to do it, they'd be like, half an hour in, like, where's the rest of it?
I'm done.
Hey, this is done. And then they'd have the creative on the call going like, so let's talk about that tiny little bit of orange that tickles the back of his ear.
They can't even see it. They don't even know what it is.
Yeah. And they're like, or they see it and they're just like, why is that important to you? Yeah. Whereas I will have seen that already and be like, oh yes, I'm going to clean that out.
Yeah, I fixed that already. That was already done. And now we're here for 3 days.
Yeah.
It's funny because the same thing happens in all parts of the industry as well. It's like, and this is another thing that's so vastly important. Ultimately, there's different types of directors. There's different types of DOPs. And they all have different styles. And I think this is so frequently lost when we have these kind of conversations. Again, with people coming up through the ranks. And it's like, where do you even start with that conversation? Because there's just so many different types of shooting.
Hugely different.
Now, I walked into a live broadcast, what's it called? A control room or whatever it would be. A live broadcast. I saw the director shouting down, I don't know, a microphone or a radio or something at someone else, somewhere else. I'm like, what the hell? This is so stressful. Like, I'm stressed out standing here and I'm not even doing a job. Go to this, go to that. I'm like, I need to be out of here right now because I'm going to have some sort of panic attack.
All of that. Very much a commercials, fashion, and music videos and short kind of world.
That's so good.
But even amongst those, you know, I've got a friend of mine who, another incredible DP, photographer, director.
Yeah.
Her name is Libby Boatwild. She does commercials and she's music videos and commercials, but her real passion is for narrative, like charity films. So recently I've done 2 incredible pieces. She did one which has just come out called A Taste of Home, which is about Syrian refugees in Lancaster, which is beautiful. I mean, she single-handedly saves my soul, I think, for the work that I do. But, you know, she'll go from doing a Syrian refugee doc, and then she did, I think, a Huawei commercial. And that in itself, I think, is that there's such different disciplines to be 1 minute doing something.
Making my head hurt even thinking about that.
Yeah, you care so deeply about something. You know, she did this one for Freedom for Girls, which was about period poverty, which really hit home for me. Was something that I hadn't really ever. It's something that I think as a girl you're aware of. You just don't really know quite.
I've heard of the project actually. Yeah.
Yeah, the extent of it.
Didn't it?
Say again?
It went to the Oscars, didn't it?
No, that was Kamali that went to the BAFTAs, I think is the one you're talking about.
Oh, I'm thinking of this one. Please, come on.
But that's another beautiful one. But no, she's, but again, like those pieces that are super informative and super passionate generally don't have much money, but they're still made beautifully because unfortunately
someone cared about them. Like that's the thing. It's being driven by the enthusiasm and by the individual, right? But
also being funded by the advertising world. It's almost like,
yeah, sure. Okay, I see what you're saying. I got a few friends like this.
Yeah, like I'll do that ad job, and that's going to pay for the time, and then we'll do that charity piece on this. On this.
That to me sucks. That sucks because like I'm hearing that charity project should have funding. I'm like those
100%.
Like,
but then you know there isn't necessarily funding for them, and that's the whole reason why you're having to raise awareness is because there isn't the funding there. And personally, I almost would rather that money go to the charity.
Goes to charity rather than the film project, of course.
Yeah.
But it's like with one hand it gives and takes with another, isn't it? And I kind of have these like minor conflicts within my own head. I'm like, all right, cool, I want to go and work for that charity, but it's like, how do we even start? Because like my own, you know, effort and time put into doing that thing, I can achieve a result. But then there's this whole like dynamic of getting it out there and distributing it and all this fun stuff. And it's like, well, I want to make it, but at the same time, if we can get some proper funding behind it, then we can go and do it properly and then suddenly get the message out to more people. At what point do you sort of like, you know, what point does that like feed into the other thing? But I completely with you. You know,
I think I sort of rationalize it by that massive oil company that paid me X amount for that job. You've just paid for that charity. Thank you so much.
I think we're getting to a bit of a different moral dilemma. How the capitalism in the universe is being balanced out.
Gotta do what you gotta do.
Redistributing wealth. The Robin Hood of
the colour world. Oh god.
That is too funny. It's, but these conflicts do come into contention at points in time. I know of directors that have like had pretty hard times committing emotional energy to like projects that didn't deserve it, if I'm completely honest. You know, they get really tied up in like treatments and pitches for like advertising, and they're like, man, just find another outlet. Like, take it easy. Like, this is important, but it's still your job. Like, you need to like get that out there. Do it. This is a creative medium. We should be doing these things, and we should be like, you know, cultivating our interests and stuff, and making sure that we have that in it. But like,
save your soul.
Right, just don't necessarily put it in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There's some beautiful ads out there that, you know, are for good. You know, there are paid charities that do beautiful ads. I'm not saying that none of them are funded. Yeah,
to be fair, one of them scared the crap out of me at the movies when we were allowed to go to the movies. And
do you remember those days?
I imagine. I was going to ask if there's stuff you missed.
You just hit it.
I'm so sorry. I love the movies too. When we could go to the movies, I saw this like really properly harrowing like ad for charity. And do you know what? It's really bad because I can't really remember what it was. But it was like some kids singing. Maybe you can get there for me. Some kids singing and they start disappearing. And I was like, oh my God, this is so horrible. Basically, unfortunately, we don't have our researcher Jake with us today because we're not live. But he would be able to jump on the Googles and find out what this is for. It's fine.
Kids singing, disappearing.
I don't want to know what comes up when you start Googling that.
Yeah, I kind of don't want to Google that.
No, not at all. One thing I do want to know is what film I'm thinking of that went to the Oscars. Because I'm sure it was about... Yeah. I'm going to get back to you on that one. We're going to like slide some things in the comments there. But certainly one of the things I did want to talk to you about was Kamali for sure. Like
Kamali.
Yeah, like what happened? Right? Seriously.
Love that film.
This thing kills me, seriously. Because I was like, damn, this is so cool. Like how... That must change your day when you get that land on your desk. How did that project come about?
So I worked with Sasha on a couple of things.
Full name, come on, so people can look at it.
Sasha Rainbow. Sasha Rainbow. I'm just dropping all my female chicks today, aren't I? They're all incredible. Sasha Rainbow is an incredible female director. I've worked with her first, I think, on a Placebo music video. Years ago, which was for e-waste, and it was I don't know whether you might have seen it. It was all shot out in Agbogbloshie in Ghana, and that was possibly, you know, when you think back to that one music video that you're like, oh wow, that was pretty amazing. It was all about electronic waste in Ghana in Agbogbloshie, and she went out there. I'm going to shot this like incredible footage of kids, like, you know, they're burning tires, and it just the atmosphere is just acrid. That's the only way I can describe it. So we worked together on that. She then did a short film. She felt so passionately when she went out there to shoot this that she then shot a short film called Coffee and Latte, which is also doing the rounds at the moment. It's Kamali's sort of overshined this one for the time being, but this one's also out there in the universe, which is based on these two kids, Coffee and Latte, that live on this e-waste dump. Watch it. It's harrowing and amazing all at the same time. These kids are beautiful. And it's about like the guy who I am not doing this film justice at all because I'm not.
So good. That's why we shout out. So we're going to check it out. Sure. I watched Kamali earlier, so I'm, you know, this one. So
we worked on this one, and then so I know Jake as well, who Jacob A, who's the cinematographer on Kamali. So when Sasha, that one came off the back of a music video as well, which was the Alpha Beast music video. I don't know if you've seen that. Which the little girl skateboarder is Kamali. And again, she saw this story about this little girl in India and went out and shot it. And Jake, shot all that on red, believe it or not.
On what, Kamali?
Yeah, Kamali's all shot on red. People think it's shot on film, but it's not. It's red.
What's interesting to me is I watched it earlier and I was like, obviously immediately enamored with the story. I was like, this is
so cute.
Cool. Because, like, I mean, I need to temper my enthusiasm talking about skateboarding because I've been talking about it a lot on this show.
Okay.
A lot of people are like, basically the whole last episode was about skateboarding. So I'm trying not to get too much.
Sasha's a skateboarder as well.
Basically, during this whole fun, you know, lockdown situation, I've been like going to the skate park like 5 a.m. before everyone else gets there, just like learning incognito. So that when I eventually get good, I can like school all these kids. I'm not that good yet. I'm not into
Brilliant. Look forward to that.
So I'm definitely in love with skateboarding now, fully. Like we're going down to the concrete bowl. We're doing that for stuff. So as soon as I saw Kamali, I'm like, yes, this is so cool. And like just everything about it. Like what I do find interesting about it. Do you know much about how it came to be in terms of how they shot it? Like, did they just like throw themselves in there and just shoot, or what? Do you know much about it?
I probably am not the best person to talk to
it's
about
fine.
how
I wasn't sure how
they
much you
shot
knew about it. So I saw the reaction on your face there was like, I know nothing about.
I know limited. Yeah, I just feel like I'm not very good at talking about people's visions for their films in that side of things, because I feel like I don't.
Okay, more literally how it's shot. Like, because like having watched
literally how it's shot is shot on red. I can tell you that. And Jake is one of the most fabulous cinematographers. And
he shot by himself or what? What's the deal?
He had a crew. His brother works with him a lot, actually, Max. There's credits on the IMDb. I can tell you everybody. I can't tell you straight off the bat everybody who worked on it.
It's available online, right? We can all have the luxury of going and watching it.
Yeah, it's available. It's on the Huffington Post. You can watch the whole film. But yeah, it was nominated for a BAFTA. But sadly, another skateboarding. Ours was skateboarding in India, but skateboarding in a war zone won.
I feel like I'm liking the fact that skateboarding is involved.
I know. 2 skateboarding films in the same category about young skateboarders. Crazy.
Yeah.
Apparently, it was a very poignant subject last year.
Well, there you go. Obviously, it's kind of what I'm clearing from that, right?
But yeah, I mean, incredible films. And
I'm not trying. In my head, I'm trying to like put myself in the shoes of BAFTA there and be like, oh, why is this one winning? But yeah, I'm going to get into it. I'm not going to be like.
I mean, that was an incredible experience. Going to the BAFTAs was like, wow. Yeah.
I'm so jealous. Like, I applied to their program like 2 or 3 times. They have like, I don't even know what it's called anymore because I got so dejected by I can't forms at all. And it was like they do 2 programs. One is like, it's like a mentorship program. It's actually really good, to be fair. So anyone that
I know a few people that are part of it and they say it's incredible. I saw a couple of people that I did, because I didn't know it was a thing. And then when I was there, I saw a couple of people that I know and was like, oh, great, what have you got in? And they said they were part of this program, which is, it sounds totally incredible.
Late to party on it, but they have a couple of different kind of mentorship programs. One's very, very in-depth. And one's like the fringes, BAFTA crew. There you go. So
that's it, BAFTA crew. I'm glad you got there, because I was like, trying to wrap my brain. Yes, because I nearly didn't get my ticket, because when they asked me when I picked up my ticket, if I was a guest or crew, I said crew, and then they couldn't find my ticket, and it all got really panicky. I should have remembered that.
It's a good initiative. They did. There was really nice things that they do, which is invite you to different talks and things like that. And I was able to go and have a listen in on some producers for some documentaries, which about like Grenfell and stuff like that. And it was around that sort of time when documentaries were being produced, and it was like the producers and the writers and the directors that were involved in those processes, and just how on earth that even came to be. So it was really interesting and a fascinating process. But like, you just get an email from BAFTA going like, oh, by the way, there's this live event going on. Obviously not so much right now, but
I wonder what they're doing.
The online library for resources is incredible, and definitely it's been like a major, like from my perspective as a director and a writer and this, that, and the other. They got very in depth.
It sounds amazing.
From all sorts of walks of life and different things like that. So it's a really cool thing. Not so much for colorists, but.
No, well, a friend of mine that I saw there was a colorist. He was part of BAFTA crew. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I did not know that. So now we can share it with everyone. Oh,
there you go. Cool. If you want to get into BAFTA crew, you can as a colorist too. Not like I'm plugging them.
Well, a little bit, but it's all good. To be fair, a lot of this is like...
I am not being paid for this endorsement.
Again, a lot of what we're saying here is there's like resources to go and find that are just easily and readily available to like...
Yeah.
And for me, late to the party on those sorts of things, but being able to uncover resources that were enabled me to discover the next parts of conversations, writing such a pivotal part, because that was always my ambition and direction from the beginning. It's like, I watched movies and was like, I just want to make that, like, how am I the one that's in charge? I was like, director, cool, no problem.
I want to be wearing the big shoes. I could not be further from that. I want to be the tiny little essential cog that nobody really gets.
Right, it's all good. It's good fun. It's important to understand where like our heads are at with all this stuff. I'm like, I want to be in charge. And like, look, I'm happy over here, part of this collaborative process, but this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
Certainly in the writing side of things, it was you just completely like throwing my.
Sorry, I just set you off.
Nah, it's all good. From the writing perspective, like looking at the industry and going like, how do you even do that? Like, where do you even start? Like having sort of, I've been writing for a great deal of time. I started writing when I tried to do college and then subsequently did nothing in that period of time. Just didn't have any idea of how to get my thoughts on paper, let alone anything else. So it was like, right, you've got something of a scene and trying to work that out. And then it's like, oh, you've got a feature. Like I'm very lucky that I'm in the post development of my first one at the moment. So it's like having written 130 pages, like better get that down a little bit. So it's a little bit out of hand right now. We're not getting too carried away. But even understanding that like, right, how do you even do that? Where do you start? How do you know if it's any good? What does that process look like? And how long does it take? I've been talking a little bit about the color process in terms of how long that takes. But like, it's very much, not, global understanding of how long any procedure should take. I started getting pretty self-conscious. I was like, 3 years in now, this is taking a while. But you've got work, you got a life, you got a job.
Yeah, of course.
And it's like that stuff just has to take a back burner. And you just have to like, right, I'm going to, like you said about your friend, I'm going to earn enough money to give myself a bit of a barrier that I can then just like take the time off and just write. But even understanding those sorts of things was like, not the most obvious thing. Gets me back onto one of my follow-up questions from earlier as well. It's like, how long does it take to actually edit a feature from your perspective? We talked about...
To edit?
Sorry, not to edit, colour. What am I talking about? No, I threw that. I just completely... It's like Josh, what are you doing to me here? That's not what
It's like, I've never edited a feature. I wouldn't even know where to start.
I said I wasn't going to punish you with any questions today either. But.
I know. To grade a feature, I mean, like I said before, I'm not really I don't really do a lot of features, so I'm not
talking very much from like your understanding, not necessarily from your direct experience, from an envy perspective, say.
Because the advertising team doesn't really do a lot of features. So I would want a minimum of 3 weeks, I would say. But it's kind of...
Like, are you aware of those sorts of things? I'm not necessarily looking for the answer here. It's just conversationally. Because like, again, people don't necessarily understand how long that process is going to take.
I mean, I think with a feature, the varying scale is so dramatic because a feature can be anything from, 58 minutes up to 3 hours. So you're...
How long did he do for...
it was like over 3 hours, wasn't it?
I think it was 3.5 hours, wasn't it?
How do we feel about that? Are we getting into that?
Shall we?
We can.
I feel like we should. But mainly because I wanted to go and watch at the movies. And it was just as things were like, that was a while ago, wasn't it? I was going to say just as things were changing, but I'm going to say in terms of the landscape of movies and streamers that debate started happening. It's like going to the movie theater versus like the streamers taking precedent. And I was like, I'm going to go and I want to watch that. And then he was like, oh, Cineworld, they don't want to put it on because...
Nobody wanted to really air it in a cinema because it was too long.
And it was going to streamer too fast, right? It was like that was part of the debate. And then I was like, all right, cool. Where can I go? Every Man, I think, had it in Central.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, 3.5 hours. That's such a huge proportion of my day. I've got to really think about that. I can't go at 9 in the evening. I'm going to be home at like 3 in the morning or something crazy. No.
And I've definitely, as I've gotten older, like I like to have a drink when I'm watching a film. And 3.5 hours is a long time to hold it.
Everyone has a bar as well, right? So you're in trouble there.
Exactly. Oh, I love me a plush seat, like glass of wine. I get really into it.
Oh, man. That's where we're getting back to that movies thing, isn't it? Like, come on, what else are you missing here?
What do I miss? I miss face-to-face with people. That's the biggest thing, I think. I miss, like, because at the moment, because I've gone, like I said earlier, I've gone back to MB now, so I'm back in the suite. I'm fortunate enough that I live a 20-minute bike ride. So I'm riding my bike over. I'm seeing my head runner, Liam, who is like my saving grace of every day at the moment. To see his smiling face is like, you're somebody that I have not seen in the supermarket or that I live with. This is wonderful. But as soon as I go into that suite and there's just me, it feels really quite lonely in there now. I'm used to I'm just used to the voices and the buzz and the chat and, you know, that banter backwards and forwards where you're like, what do you think of this? And like moving things on the fly. Like, yeah, I've got people on Zoom. So like I'll have my laptop set up. I'm sharing my screen so everyone can see. And we're talking like this. But that banter backwards and forwards between everyone just isn't, it's not the same.
I guess that this is not normal for everyone as well. Like we probably both become more accustomed to this whole procedure. But the reality is we're both sitting in front of a computer right now. It's like, this is super normal for us. Like we're talking completely normally. But at the same time, a lot of people are like, I'm not going to say the same things. I'm not going to have the same sort of conversations as I would as if I was in the room with you. And as like passing sort of distractions and sort of quips, I guess, as well.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. There's a vibe. There's always a vibe in my suite. And also I actually, this is something that I realized the other day, and I kind of hadn't mentioned it to anybody up until now, which was in my suite, I always have like different playlists on. And it's something that I used to pride myself with, was having really cool playlists in my suite. And we'd have a little bit of it was always like good vibes in there. So like everyone's chatting, the music's on. I don't understand
why you have a job now. Like, just like have a party.
Nothing to do with the colour. It's people come for the party.
It's just fun. It's all good.
They come for the gin. And like, so there was always like good vibes. Everyone's having a laugh. The work's getting done, but the vibes are good. Since the lockdown and since having this like backwards and forwards over Zoom, I don't have any music on in the suite anymore because I can't have music on in the suite and talk on Zoom at the same time. She can't hear me.
Oh, man.
So now my grading suite is quiet. So the one thing that has really got me now is at the end of a grade, there'd always be like a hug. Sometimes we'd go for a beer down the pub. Mm-hmm. And there'd always be like this sort of like celebration after a grade. It's almost like, it's like when I used to work in photography, I used to say my job was great because it ends on a clap, because most photo shoots end with a clap. Like everyone's like, well done everyone, woo, great day.
You can tell you're on fashion, yeah.
Yeah.
Well done everybody, it's all good. Everyone did a great
job.
Yeah,
woo, we're all fantastic. Yay, clap. That was many years of my life. I loved it. So, you know, like now at the end of the day, there's no hugs. There's no going to the pub. It's almost like everyone goes like, yeah, bye guys. Have a nice day. Bye. Zoom. And then it's really eerily quiet in my suite because there's no music and there's nothing. And then sometimes I'll stay a lot later than our head runner because he's got lots of buildings to look after. And then I'm like, I'll leave and I'll look at the building on my own. And it's just like a real anticlimax.
I get it.
From what I've been used to for so many years. It's almost like, okay, that's done now. I mean, that probably sounds really spoiled, like how many people end their day on a clap and going to the pub for beers, but you know, it's my life. I like it.
It's all good. That's part of the job for you.
Yeah.
Missing that at all. So you got that in the movie theatre. I mean, to be fair.
The movie is massively like, and restaurants miss going. I realised when lockdown started as well, I don't cook that much.
And now you do, or you just haven't eaten?
Well, I started getting really fat because when I started cooking myself, I realised I eat quite healthy when I eat out, but when I cook for myself, yeah, not so much. Please bring back restaurants.
I myself into having doing that because, like, at the same time as this happened, the gym also shut. So I was like, oh no.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing. So everybody's out and they're doing their runs. I'm not a runner at all. I run like Phoebe from Friends. I don't. And it's like a running joke between my friends that I can't actually run backwards either. You know, like people can jog backwards.
I don't know about that. No, it's throwing me like, have I seen anyone do that?
Yeah, you know, like somebody will be talking, then they'll turn around and they'll like run backwards. And they do it so naturally, like it's a thing. Well, that's not a thing for me. I can't run backwards.
I don't think this is a people thing. I think this is something for you guys.
No, you'll realise that you can run. Hopefully you can't. And then I'll be like, yay, you're with me in one of the minority of the population that can't run backwards.
Well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe if I try and run backwards, I'm not doing this. I'm not satisfying this curiosity for you.
I really want you to try and run backwards now.
I'm already making it hard for myself because I'm like, skateboarding, I can injure myself that like as much as I need to, but trying to run back, I'm not getting into this.
But yeah, no, I don't jog, and my fitness is swimming. So I used to go to the Lido in Hackney, and obviously that's been closed since lockdown began.
I mean, you just jump in the river, no? You can just jump in the river. No?
Are you going to jump in the river? I mean, the river's...
I don't live in London, so... The river around here is distinct.
All right, your river's fine. I am not jumping in the Thames. I value my life way too much to jump in the Thames.
That's fair enough. Maybe there's like a smaller part of it, which is a bit safer.
God, I come out like something out of X-Men.
We're not encouraging this, babe. Yeah, it's all good. We can have some fun with it.
I mean, I'm sure it's fine for those that swim in the Thames.
I love that this started with trying to be technical, and then we were trying to make sure we didn't get too nerdy on it, and then we went full circle back the other way. I think there's some point we were trying to work out there's like an order of importance of stuff when people deliver you food at some point in time, but I don't know where we got with that. I think it was like exposure was important. I think we just left it there. I think let's try and be technical. So like, is there anything else that's important from your perspective? We got the exposure bit,
Exposure, white balance. I mean, they're the two main. If you've exposed it right, you've got your white balance. You've not shot it 720p and you're intending it for projection. That's another thing. Okay. It's one thing to know your resolution, know your end output. So if you're going into something and you've said to your client that you're going to do projection, for example, a standard grade won't give you what's called a DCP, a digital cinema package, which is a very different grade. So the black level will be different and your white level will be different for a cinema grade. So knowing your end output and communicating with your colorist what your end output, because obviously if whatever you're shooting and your grading is going to end up in a cinema, you ideally want to finish that grade. If it's, say for example, it's going on Netflix and then it's going into cinema, you're going to want two finished products for that. You're going to want one that's been graded in a cinema setting. You can go down, you can grade in cinemas and finish that way. And then you're going to want one that's been graded maybe on a HDR if it's for Netflix. So there's knowing what your footage and where your footage is going to go is really important, and communicating that all the way through the end line as well.
I love that we got there. That was such important and critical, like technical information. It satisfied a purpose. I'm so happy about that. I mean, I want to put too much speculation out there, but cinema, the main thing is the brightness, right? On a projector, it's like it's completely different in terms of projection, in terms of how that image is actually produced, right?
Yeah.
Did actually mention a very relevant point there as well in terms of like the Netflix demands. Like, how much scrutiny do you find yourselves under in the post-production side to deliver spec? Like, does that conversation like straight down the line now? Is that workflow like figured out, or is it
Netflix has a very specific workflow? I don't do much Netflix stuff. For the last post office I was at, we started to, there's a strict protocol that's got to be followed for Netflix. Broadcast side does Netflix. Mm-hmm. Advertising, obviously, we're not really in that world at the moment, so we're a different beast. But yeah, Netflix have their protocols, and you have to follow Netflix protocols. Otherwise, it will
right?
get straight from the minute you pick up your camera. That is all. It's very systematic on what they expect and what you need to deliver. And
I know a lot of people get caught up by this sort of stuff. They're like, I need to buy the camera that does the Netflix thing. Like the spec list for Netflix comes out, and everyone's like, I better get that camera that fits for that, because at some point in time I might need that. But it's like, hold on.
Yeah, hold up, back it up. Know what your pieces of the puzzle is, and then work to that.
Like, if you're actually directly getting employed by Netflix, that's a different ballgame. If you're making a project that might have an end delivery of Netflix and that's your ambition, different story still.
Yes, exactly. If Netflix have commissioned you to do a show, then yes, you have to follow their strict guidelines. If you're shooting something with a view that Netflix is the only place you want it to go, then yes, follow their guidelines. If you're shooting something and you hope that Netflix might pay you some attention at some point in the future, you don't need to be so strict on your Netflix guidelines.
It's important though, because there's so much of a public conversation about these sorts of things, and a lot of people get very upset about it. It's like, I understand that there's definitely, streaming isn't going anywhere, especially the likes of the big streaming platforms, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, and how much weight they hold in the industry. But it's so important that these people just like, okay, relax, make your film, get involved with doing the processes. I know it's from first-hand experience, in terms of like getting a bit transfixed with that sort of stuff. We're like aiming for feature territory. And before we sort of pick up cameras, they're going like, okay, cool, what do we need? and getting a bit into that. Now, my requirements are different to most people's. So we actually were looking to Netflix in that requirement, but subsequently we did the diligence that was required to meet that. So,
well, I mean, all you've got to look is there's a Soderbergh film that's shot on an iPhone on Netflix.
I love that we've been talking shit about iPhones as well. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that one? Have you seen it? Which one was it? Basketball film.
The basketball film, yeah. I mean, the thing is...
I love that our movie title knowledge is terrible. The basketball film.
I'm really bad. That is something that I've tried to be better at, but unfortunately, I retain knowledge for like very limited things, like quite niche brain cannons. A lot of other things go out the window. But the one thing that I would say as a colorist is a curse is if something is badly lit or badly graded, it takes away from the story. So I know editors that are like, oh God, that cut was terrible. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Because I've probably been really excited by a beautiful grade and I haven't even noticed the edit really, because I get distracted by color and light and all things pretty. In the same way, you know, I've been with sound designers and they're like, oh my God, can you hear that? I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I can't hear it.
You become hypersensitive to things. Like that's your
sense. Like they're fixated on that. Yeah. So
can you even watch movies now, like with that in mind?
Well, this is what I'm saying about iPhone footing.
Okay, so that's the thing. You're just like... Ugh.
So for me, as a colorist, the story can be incredible, but if the grading is terrible, it takes me, unless it's some sort of fodder.
It better be amazing, right? That's what I'm getting the picture of here.
Yeah, like if it's like I finished work, I'm really tired, I'm having a TV dinner and I'm going to watch some really cheesy American teen drama because that's my go-to, like Gossip Girl or something. Like, there we go, judge me all you like.
Definitely. This is the look of judgment as well as the sound of judgment right here.
That's all right. I don't care. But like something like that, if I'm signing up for it, I know it's not going to be great. So I'm like, it rolls over me because
your expectations are already diminished. Yeah.
But the minute I sit down to watch a film, that's a different, like I go into a different zone. It's like, okay, I've got my popcorn and like I'm in, like the lights have been set to the movie mode, like boom, let's do this. And then all of a sudden I'm like, what is that? And that's it. I can't watch the story anymore. And I fixate. I'll be like watching the tracking maths and like, why is that highlight? And
I hate to even admit that I watched this now because it's so jarring. But there was one of the Lord of the Rings movies. They had a GoPro shot that was in the river. Do you know this shot?
I know the shot.
They went to... What was it?
Why? What was the need?
They went to IMAX as well with it. I watched it in IMAX because that was a big deal about it. And it was like, I felt like someone had...
Wait, it was a 4K GoPro.
I felt like someone accidentally included like a proxy in it that was ungraded. And I was just like, I'm not in the film anymore.
It's that's what I'm talking about. Like that, you buy into a reality when you're watching something that, like, if, like, say for example, is it Sicario that's really yellow, like the whole thing.
By the way, so don't.
No, I'm not gonna, because when I first watched Sicario, it's so burnt. Like the colors are really like sort of muddy and burnt and yellow, and it's a really strong look. So when you first like turn it on, it's like, oh God, strong. But then you forget, like 10 minutes into the film, you're in it and you're in the story, and that's the world that they've set for you. So you're buying everything they do. If all of a sudden they graded something in the middle of that film as daylight, you'd be like, ugh. Like,
it was so jarring.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of like grading, is to get that continuity. And once you've gone with a look, like you have to stick it and you have to follow it. So when you throw, like if you've got everything beautifully shot on Arri RAW, for example, and then you throw in a DJI drone footage that's this happens. It happens in adverts all the time.
That's why I'm laughing, because that's the reality is like, I have, you and I both have to have these kind of conversations at different points down the line. You're in a different part of that conversation. I'm in the early part of that conversation, which is like, we've only got X money. That helicopter is going to cost X. So, and it's like, but there's a reason why, and who's going to get it? And I guess it probably comes down to who's scrutinizing things. Like, you, for absolutely every reason, have a completely different level of criteria that you are satisfying than just generally someone that's not in India.
Yeah. End user that wants to buy the Hewlett-Packard printer doesn't really care that the DJI drone shot of that beautiful meadow isn't shot in a helicopter, but it will kill my soul all day.
Okay, let's get a little bit technical. Bit technical.
Let's do this.
In terms of understanding then, we've got ARRI RAW, as you said, and we've got DJI, and it will be like a H.264, H.265 probably native. I think they do have a RAW code as well, right?
Yeah, HEVC as well. Yeah.
They can shoot a bit of RAW as well.
Which one are we talking about now? The new one. The new one can shoot RAW. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Do you know what? As well as film names, I am terrible at low-end camera names.
I'm aware that that's fine. It's fine. They can do a version of RAW. I think it's like a really clunky one that might have been, what is it? Come on, help me out with the RAW here. You should know this stuff.
I'm trying to get to what you're talking about.
RAW, is it DNG? Like it's a stills format?
Yeah. DNG. Yeah. You've got DNG.
One. Right. So imagine we've got those two formats. What's problematic in the grade about getting those two? Getting
them to meet in the middle.
Yeah.
Right. So
I know it's tough. I know.
I'm trying to think how best to describe this.
Of course, we want to get 101 on this.
So I described iPhone footage the other day as to somebody as putty, and I think this is probably the best way to describe the DJI as well. Please. Bear with me on this, right? So if you imagine you've got some Play-Doh, right? Fresh out the tub Play-Doh, and it's stretchy and it's squidgy, and you can sort of move it around, do whatever you want with it. That's your ARRI RAW, right? Imagine you put that in the oven and you bake it for 48 hours and you get it back out and you try and stretch it again. It's just going to fall apart. That's your H.265. So basically, your ARRI RAW footage, you can do whatever you want with it, and then you can turn it into a H.265.
You can't turn the H.265.
Fine, but you can't reverse that process. So once you're locked into something at that low, it's almost like the H.265 goes, okay, right, I'm looking at the scene. All right, so you've got yellow on your post-its. I can see you've got a bit of red behind you, and you've got a bit of blue in you.
Gene Simmons,
yeah. Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm sort of assessing what you've got and I'm remembering it. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, okay, cool, what did you remember? And it's like, okay, well, I think it was a bit of yellow there. I think it was a bit of red there. And this is H.264, by the way.
I love the way you explain this, because like it's a really, really solid example that I'm now understanding. Go ahead, keep going.
All right, so it's like, I'm kind of remembering it, and that's what you've got. So that's what your H.264 is. It's essentially like remembered, like that. Whereas your ProRes Quad Force, for example, is going photo, and then it's recreating it exactly. So that's the best way that I've ever simplified it down to the difference in the codecs.
I like what you're doing. My understanding can help just like connect the dots a bit more and be like, all right, cool, absolutely correct. What a digital technology in junior codec terms, or like those
very basic stripped down terms. It's a lot more intelligent than that, but
it's super important. Like the compressed codec is making up the information by previous imagined information, isn't it? Right. So those pixels and that kind of information saying it looks like this now. The next frame, I'm going to change what's changed rather than renew the complete frame, correct?
Yes, exactly. It remembers it rather than saves it as an exact copy.
You're not getting the same information again. So you're not getting, if we're literally moving, like my hand's moving, you're not getting the same hand in the same place twice. No. You're getting an imagined version of the first one with the different pixels that's changed, right?
Exactly.
Bingo. That's cool. Hopefully that helps the audience some way in understanding.
But there's a time, like I say, there's a time and a place for it. So if you want to put something on Vimeo after you've finished everything, then by all means, upload that as a H.265 file.
Codec, right?
It's an export codec. It's not something that you want to be ingesting. So that being said, when we start talking about bit depth, the bit depth is for a colorist if you imagine you have a sheet of paper going from black to white, and on a quad 4, that will be a really smooth gradient going all the way down, because that will be, say 16-bit or 12-bit.
I'm about to say quad 4 is like anything 12-bit upwards, correct?
Yeah, 12-bit upwards. So that will be a really nice smooth gradient all the way down. A H.264 will be 8-bit. And so those increments going from black to white will be segmented. And that's what then you might see in some videos, banding, we call it, where you get lines appearing in skies and anything that's a gradiated color.
Because the information is just simply not there, yeah.
The information isn't there and it's low compression. So when we talk about ingesting H.264, the colorist, when we sample things, say for example, rewind about on my screen right now, I'm wearing really.
Yeah, really. Ironically, you were talking about compression breaking up.
Oh, really?
That's hilarious. Well, we can get into why that happens on a live broadcast. It's like as if the most hilarious statement then is like recreated in front of you.
Brilliant. Where shall I start from?
It's all good. We were at connecting the dots between like the color information. So we're getting a physical gradient rather than a linear gradient, I guess is the best way to start back into that.
So from the ProRes?
Yeah.
Okay. So shall I just do the whole ProRes bit again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So if you imagine a ProRes, you've got black going to white. It's ProRes quad 4. And that's a 16-bit, and from 12-bit up 16-bit, that whole thing is going to be super smooth. You're going to have a really nice gradient. So for things like skies, that's where you want that sunset going from like
blue and the brightness. We've got color information changing as well as brightness information changing.
Exactly. So you get a really smooth gradient and you get a really dreamy looking sunset or whatever. However, other side, get onto the H.264, that's 8-bit. So those steps that going from black to white, the information isn't there between the steps. So because you've tossed half of that information away, that's when you then get what we call banding, and you get steps in the grade. So when you look at a sky, and then you'll see it as you're going from white to dark, like these sort of like lines going through it. And that's just where the color information isn't there. Now, if you have that as your starting point, it basically means as a colorist, say for example on my image right now, I've got a really bright red lipstick, and the client might say to me, if this is a beauty grade, they might be like, yeah, we don't want to use that lipstick anymore. We think it's a little bit too red. So can you dial that down a little bit? On a quad 4 file, I can just sample that red, and there's enough difference in my face to be able to then just ease that down. Won't need to track it. It will be. If I try to do that on a H.264 file, chances are it'll probably go, okay, cool, that's kind of it. But then
red as well,
it'll probably sample in some like my cheeks. It'll probably get like my guitar in the corner in, because it just doesn't have that same smooth gradient and it doesn't have that same color depth. I hope that makes sense.
I tell you it does. The thing is, at the end of the day, like this is just something to help people benefit their future understanding, and find some rabbit holes to go down and like get lost in some information, because that's kind of what it is. It's like a big part of what I've always talked about in these kind of conversations when I've been talking to someone coming through the ranks or whatever, is like, it's just like finding out what you don't know, because you don't know what you don't know. And it's like, oh, cool, there's a little pocket of information that you can go and divert some time towards. And even the difference is like 8, 10-bit, 12-bit. Okay, yeah, there's 2 numbers there, but like that's between hundreds and thousands of colors, and then thousands of colors. And like you said about those steps, it's like, if you think about literally like blocks, and it's like, cool, now those blocks are smoother because there's more information in between the blocks. And now they just get smoother and smoother the more color you add.
Exactly. So you're better at explaining this than I am. I just tend to take my knowledge for granted. I'd be a terrible teacher.
It's all good. I needed you to do that bit first so I could then fill in the gaps, because like that's, like my brain did this learning immediately when I became fascinated with the technical side. So there's a whole raft of knowledge that comes from that, which I've been very grateful to sort of be in the right places and be in the right times. And obviously, like, I didn't go the conventional university or film school route, so I had to find this stuff like retrospectively. I was like, okay, I should probably educate myself on this stuff now. And I was, I went to the, Dado Valentic, I mentioned him earlier on. He was a great asset in being, doing some color training with those things, but it was more about acquisition. So helping me understand how that pipeline worked, how digital imaging and sensors and stuff then went, okay, cool, that's your sensor. It sees the image. Then the bit in the middle does the calculations, and like how expensive that bit is, how good that calculation is.
Oh yeah, you pay a lot for that calculation.
And then it comes out the other end in whatever format, whether it's an SD card or an SSD or a whatever, whatever raw format.
And then you have to have more money there essentially at the other end of the receiving end, because that's how much data you're going to be receiving.
Precisely. And how proficient your computer is at interpreting that information depends on how much problem I give to you.
Exactly. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we came back. We lost you for like a second where you went a bit like, it was really funny because you were laughing at the same time, but
I just do one of those like.
Absolutely, yeah, perfect.
Oh God. Brilliant, love it.
The premise is that we're getting to is that we're starting to like just kind of build a bit of a layman's understanding. There'll be information hopefully here that's useful to people that are at that point in their career where they're coming to people like yourself and they're going, right, cool, now I know what information I need to provide Jax in order to like satisfy those requirements, but also, get yourself prepared. Obviously most of the situations you'll have a producer for sure that will be like helping you out with that part of it. But if you don't, you might have aspirations. They might have a charity film that they want a free grade on.
Or just reach out. Just like the best thing to do, if when in doubt, ask the question. Like, people message me on Instagram all the time asking me stuff. So, reach out. I'm a human.
I think, I'll wait for a second for that to finish.
We're fine.
It's all good. We're good. It totally goes away.
I don't know whether you've heard my cat keep crying in the background. It keeps going.
You need to bring a cat in there.
No, it's fine. It's just, he was stood next to me at one point. I was trying to pretend that he wasn't there because he was going.
Amazing. We were totally going to do that Sky. Is a Sky broadcaster thing where they're like going, like kids come in.
Oh yeah, just like.
It's all good. It's live. This is what we're dealing with here. So it's all good fun. I kind of want to meet your cat now.
Oh, I don't know where he's hidden. I'm not gonna. If I bring him back, he's gonna. I don't even know what he even wanted. I think he wanted food. Because I'm
cat's doing okay now. When we've been deprived of food,
he'll be fine. He'll survive.
It's so good. It's so good. I'm glad to. I know that you can take care of him, and I'm not responsible for the situation, so it's all good. Where were we anyway? We were good. We were talking about the fact that we're both in this situation. We're able to give a bit of that information back to people. That's what we were. We were talking about like people that can be prepared when they're coming to have those conversations with you. That was it. Hitting people up. Yeah. There we got to. So people hit you up. Questions. There we go.
Yeah. If you're unsure, I think that's the best thing to do. The best thing to do is if you don't know, is ask. Like definitely. If you're not sure if what Kodak you're going to shoot is the right thing, ask. If you're not sure if the camera's right, ask. Because, like we said before, if your end product is only going in a certain direction, then you don't need to be spending thousands of pounds on like the biggest sensors. The best thing that you can invest that cash in is good lenses. That's the other thing that we've talked a lot about the cameras themselves, but the lenses, they have a massive effect on the grade too.
Huh. I mean, that is suddenly a new rabbit hole. I was like, oh yeah, lenses.
Yeah, lenses. This is the thing. You can have your white balance set and your exposure set, and then you change your lens, and then you need to address that again because each lens will have a different characteristic.
And stuff like that, yeah, as well as everything else, contrast and all sorts of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's fine. We can give the audience something to do in that regard. That's totally something we can be responsible for that. We can lead this conversation and we can be like, cool, here you go, audience. Here's a little seed. To be fair, as I said, we're going to have other folks from the industry. I mean, maybe we have you back on at some point in time. It'd be a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I don't want to steal all the colour chat.
It's all good.
You probably get someone a bit more technical.
Absolutely not, because it's what is really important from my perspective is that even in your department, right, you got engineers that might take care of like the very technical element of the digital negative right away, and then they're going to deliver that to you, and you get to do your job. Which is the creative element, like coloring the image or whatever, the creative treatment or color treatment that you're working with is in that position. So it's very important that people understand that like you have as much.
It's a team of people that create this. It's not, I get the fun bit, I get the credit, but there is a whole crew of people that are working on this before I get it.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is that's what I'm just trying to sort of help expand from my own knowledge. Like I came to that very late understanding that there's all these people here that need to know what's going on, but that they're here to help. And this is a collaborative medium, and that's how you get the best results. Obviously, with the best will in the world, you don't always have the money you want for everything. You don't always have the pre-production you need. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, cool. If you do have those things, there's definitely an order of priority and importance in terms of, right, let's make sure we've at least got this. And there shouldn't be anything less than that, at least, certainly. So anyway, I digress. We've totally gotten into a whole bunch of really cool stuff. And Jax, I'm really, really, really super happy that you're able to share not only a bunch of cool stories with us, but just your insight in terms of the industry as well, and help people understand where you're at and a few ways, if they choose to get into color and that's what they want to do, ways in which they can start going towards that world. And hopefully provide
it helped.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't. Maybe we just
maybe we just brought up more questions than we started with.
Totally possible. Absolutely possible. Hopefully, Jax,
if they have, email you, not me.
Oh man, I was just about to give out your Instagram email as well. I was like, you can go here, but Jax out.
You can hit me up.
There you go. From Jax's mouth. I'm not putting those words in. But certainly, if you've got further questions, obviously Jax is a wonderful person and giving you the ability to actually have a conversation with her. Check her stuff out anyway. I mean, you want to check out all the films that she works on. Certainly Kamali, go and check it out, right?
Definitely watch Kamali. It's awesome.
Yeah, you got 24 minutes of awesomeness there. And what was the name of the other short as well?
Libby Buck Wildman.
Yes.
Or so there's Absent, which is another incredible one. The other Sasha Rainbow film is Coffee and Latte. That's Coffee and Latte. That's coming out. Well, it's doing the festival circuit, so that's what it was doing pre-lockdown. I don't know where everybody is post-lockdown.
Well, we'll have to check it out anyway. Well, hopefully you can update us on your Instagram stories after Wednesday when this is actually going to be broadcast. So this will go out Wednesday, and then after that point, you'll be like, oh, people start hitting me up. I thought this would happen earlier.
I'll be like, why are people talking to? Who are these people?
It's all good. It's all good. Well, Jax, again, thank you so much for giving us your time today.
Thanks for having me on.
Very much appreciate it. I'm sure CBP's audience super grateful for the insight. So thank you very much and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you so much.